Check. Miguel Salazar, House Democratic Caucus. Good morning.
Good morning. Xavier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, joined by the Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley. Had a good discussion in today's caucus meeting. We understand that there may be some attempt by Republicans to actually leave early from an already shortened work session for this year, but we'll see. There are a number of things that we have to discuss. Before I go to those things that are pending, I want to leave a little quiz for all who are listening and watching. What do Benghazi, Planned Parenthood, and IRS Commissioner John Koskinen have in common? Think about that. And let me now turn to the work that is at hand. And the most prominent of those items is a budget. We are once again within 3 weeks of Republicans shutting down our federal government, and it's not clear how quickly things will move. But once again, it's not going to be a full year budget, and it looks like once again Republicans are left with trying to do a piecemeal budget that will require us to come back likely in December, if they can even get together to agree on that, to try to finish off the fiscal year budget for the federal government. As I always say, no small business on Main Street in America would operate this way. Why should the largest economy in the world be operated by Congress this way? And so budget is the foremost item that we have to get done, but not far behind, and perhaps for a lot of Americans, especially in Florida, even more important than a budget, is finally giving the National Institute of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the monies and resources and tools they have said to Congress they've needed for some 7 or 8 months to battle the Zika virus, which has now taken its toll on a number of Americans. We no longer have to speculate about that. We know that nearly 19,000 U.S. citizens have contracted the Zika virus in the U.S. and U.S. territories. We know that at least 1,700 women in America who are pregnant have been tested with possible Zika virus infection in the U.S. and U.S. territories. And so what we know now is what Tom Frieden, the CDC director, has been saying for a while. The cupboard is bare. CDC, NIH are out of money to deal with Zika, and they need Congress to act now. Gun violence prevention, the Orlando shooting, the most devastating, the largest count of Americans who died from a mass killing, just a few months removed, and yet not one single vote yet to prevent gun violence in America. There are two simple measures that many of us in the House and Senate have been proposing that have the support of some 80 to 90% of all Americans, including gun owners. Republicans in the House will not permit a single vote on either of those two measures. One, which would simply say, let's have universal background checks of anyone who wishes to purchase a weapon in the U.S. The second simply says, if you're too dangerous to fly in planes in America and you're on a no-fly list, then you should be considered too dangerous to go into a gun shop and walk out with an assault weapon. Very simple measures. Can't get a vote on that. Opioid addiction, we know it's rampant. No vote on that. Flint, Michigan, how long has it been since the people and the children of Flint, Michigan found out that they were drinking lead-contaminated water from their faucets? Still nothing done on that. And so all these things are left undone. So I turn to you to the quiz I just asked on Benghazi, Planned Parenthood, and IRS Commissioner John Koskinen. What do they have in common? Really nothing, except for the fact that rather than do our work in passing a budget, in dealing with Zika, the Zika virus, in providing measures to reduce gun violence in America, rather than deal with the opioid epidemic, rather than deal with the lead contamination in Flint's water, Republicans in the House of Representatives have decided they want to continue the Benghazi hearings that have gone on for years, and with more than 7 or 8 of these investigations completed. They want to focus on their obsession to cut funding for women's health in Planned Parenthood, and they seem intent on trying to force a vote to impeach the IRS Commissioner, John Koskinen, has simply done his job. And it seems like they are intent on making sure that anyone who tries to enforce our tax laws, especially against secret money, pay the price. And this intimidation has now reached the IRS Commissioner. That's what Republicans in the House are proposing to do in these next few weeks, rather than the business that people want us to take care of. Democrats, we are ready to get the people's business done. We don't want to see a government shut down by Republicans, and we want to just pass those bills that would deal with our budget, deal with Zika funding, deal with gun violence prevention, deal with the opioid epidemic, deal with Flint, Michigan, and get it done now so we can then focus on a jobs agenda for this country. With that, let me yield to the Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought this was a little bit like Jeopardy, and I was going to answer. Your question was, what is it that Republicans continue to mislead the American people on? That was pretty good, I thought. Thank you very much. I'm here all week, by the way. I'm here all week. Let me thank the chairman for once again bringing to focus just what it is we're here about and what is at stake for the American people. This really is a true test as to whether or not the Republican majority in the House of Representatives can lead. They've proven in the past they can't, but they have another opportunity right now to prove whether or not they can lead on behalf of the American people. Aren't there enough crises in the world and in the United States? Some man-made, some naturally made. We think of what's happening in Louisiana today and are reminded of just the vulnerabilities that Americans face every day, whether it be through hurricanes or earthquakes or tornadoes or other natural disasters that potentially can happen. They want to know that the government of the United States, their government, is there and has their back. And at the same time, we see the Zika virus. Again, not a man-made per se issue, but something that is threatening the safety and the well-being of our homeland, of our country. And yet Republicans continue to not act, not do what's in the best interest of the American people. And that's a real question as to whether or not they have the ability to lead or continue to create these false deadlines, to continue to create these false fiscal deadlines. And not really governing, not setting a budget, not coming up with a budget for the American people, and then again failing to come through in a long-term way of addressing the issues of concern for the American people. That's what they continue to not accomplish, whether it be on Flint, Michigan, on Zika, on the opioid issue, and on gun violence in America. They're more focused on punishing Democrats for exercising free speech, for exercising what we could do to bring attention of gun violence, the issue of gun violence, to the American people. I think we succeeded in helping to bring back focus on that. But now the Republicans, all they want to focus on is the investigation they did into Democrats, what they knew, when they were doing what, as opposed to actually holding a single hearing on the issue of gun violence in the United States. Not calling for a task force, not calling for a select committee to delve into what really is killing thousands of people, tens of thousands of people annually. That's a failure on behalf of the Republican Congress to lead, on their failure to help make the lives of Americans better. And I think a lot of Americans have to ask themselves, are their lives better off now than they were 2 years ago when Republicans continued this game of no-show here in Washington? I like to think that, maybe to some degree it's dysfunctionality, but in reality, this is obstructionism, what's going on. I have to start to believe and begin to believe that this is willful. These are willful acts that the Republican majority is taking to deny what the American people want, and that is action on Zika, action on Flint, Michigan, on the opioids crisis, pass a budget that is reasonable for the American people, that shows and represents the values of the American people, and also attack the issue of gun violence in the United States. They have failed on all accounts. The American people are watching. I hope on behalf of the American people that they can show some leadership, but I'm not holding my breath.
On Zika, will Zika be a part of the stopgap funding? And if so, do you envision a scenario where the EPA pesticide requirement blocks are also not included? And also on a similar environment front, I know I asked about this last week, the White House pitched that there was anomalies, a task of boost as part of the CR. Do you see that happening? Do you see the House Progressive Caucus also called for Flint, a Flint supplemental? Do you see that?
So several questions. Let me try to at least for sure tackle the Zika question. As you can see, some 1,750 women in America have gone through tests, and those tests seem to indicate that they have now contracted the Zika virus. Those are U.S. citizens. Now, remember the stat that was given to us a while ago that because the cost of treating a child born with Zika and the effects of the Zika virus, what it would do to that child born as a result of a woman who is pregnant with Zika, could cost somewhere around $10 million over the life of that newborn. 200 newborns that are impacted as a result of a woman who's pregnant who has Zika would essentially cover the same amount of money that the CDC and NIH have requested to prevent any Americans from ever having contracted the Zika virus. Well, we're way beyond Americans, one or two Americans contracting the Zika virus. More than 18,000 U.S. citizens have now contracted the Zika virus. 1,750 women possibly who are pregnant, possibly infected with Zika. And so the consequences of even that number of pregnant women delivering babies who have been impacted by Zika could far outstrip the cost that it would have been to have started prevention of Zika at the beginning of the year when the president and NIH and CDC requested it. That number, 1,750 pregnant women, is a legacy of a do-nothing Congress that was unwilling to give CDC the resources it needed to start tackling this right away. We're going to fight to make sure that any funding, getting the resources to our health generals to do the work, is not done with threats by Republicans that the money won't go, the resources won't go unless the Republican extreme conservative agenda gets tacked on to any bill that passes. So for Republicans to be demanding things in a Zika bill that have nothing to do with Zika, that have nothing to do with what CDC and NIH have requested, is outrageous, because that number is going to continue to grow beyond 1,751 American women who are pregnant. And for them to be holding hostage funding for Zika virus prevention so they can get things that they can't get passed under a regular order with a bill up on its own is, I think, outrageous. I mean, it's certainly risking the lives of so many Americans. Joe?
Would you there be referring to that pesticide language as well? Is that a necessary quid pro quo? Can we talk about that?
Did CDC or NIH request that language? Is CDC demanding that this bill include things that Republicans are demanding? If so, then I'm going to defer to the healthcare experts, the generals as I call them, who tell us what they need. What they're telling us, they need the money now because, as I quoted before, the cupboard is dry, is bare. The cupboard is bare, and they need the resources to try to tackle this now. If CDC is not requesting things that Republicans are demanding in order to get a vote, then Republicans are playing a very dangerous political game of trying to get their conservative social agenda into a bill that's a must-pass bill that could help save the lives not just of Americans and pregnant women, but of newborns to come.
How jittery are members of your caucus about the health of
Do you want to start with that?
There's no jitter at all.
There was no chatter about this? Nobody?
None whatsoever at the meeting this morning. I chaired the meeting as the chairman allowed for this morning, and the chairman was there this morning, allowed me to chair the meeting. There was not a single question, not a single reverberation at all this morning. I think people understand that Hillary Clinton, as great a woman as she is just that, a human being, a woman. She's not a demigod. She's susceptible to the same things we all are, to a cold, to the flu, to pneumonia, to any various number of things that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. What I continue to say, myself to other people, is it's remarkable that she knew that she had pneumonia and that she still got up on Sunday morning to be at the site of 9/11 for the victims' families. And I took pictures of her with family members. So I stood right next to her. I knew exactly. She was very cognizant and aware of what was going on. And that wasn't the first time she's been to the memorial site. I was with her 5 years ago when she was Secretary of State. She was there when the memorial opened. That was not her first time to the 9/11 memorial on 9/11. It was not her first time, not hers. I don't recall ever seeing her opponent. He's a hard guy to miss. I don't recall ever seeing her opponent there. But she thought it was important enough, despite her own ailment at the time, to put that aside, to be there for the victims' families. That speaks to how remarkable a person I think she is.
Are you concerned, though, that she didn't tell the American people about her diagnosis about pneumonia, and we only found out about it multiple hours after she disappeared for hours at a time?
This is not...
And she was diagnosed on Friday, and we didn't hear about it until Sunday.
Last time I checked, this is not the 1800s nor the early 1900s. Pneumonia is a very treatable thing. I think the vice president... It's something that is more than treatable. It's become almost commonplace.
Do you think she's transparent enough about
I think Mrs. Clinton has indicated that, and her campaign has indicated she's going to be even more forthcoming with information about this. But all of a sudden, it's about the transparency of Mrs. Clinton. What about the transparency of Mr. Trump, who refuses once again, continuously, to even, beside his doctor's note, I got a note from my doctor that says I'm perfectly fine. He continues to refuse to indicate or show any of his tax returns, some that we suspect will indicate he paid no taxes some years, zero taxes. How many American citizens get away with paying zero taxes every year? That would show he made no personal charitable contributions, that he spends other people's money for the purposes of charity, but not his own. You know, in terms of, let's have a fair hand here. There's a double standard for Mrs. Clinton and Donald Trump. He doesn't have to show anything. He can walk right up to the election and show absolutely nothing, continue to repeat lies, lie after lie after lie, and he's not held accountable. She has pneumonia. She had pneumonia, has pneumonia. It's not as uncommon as you may think. The vice president indicated he had walking pneumonia last year. He didn't tell anybody. Should we have known that the vice president had walking pneumonia last year? Should we have known it?
How does this still play into that narrative that, maybe not on the transparency part, but the idea that she has health issues, going back to her concussion and things a couple of years ago, and even though
Sure.
some people are going to just take that and run with it, even if that's not...
They're going anyway, yeah. I think we all experience health issues and sometimes crises from time to time. Every American, every human being is vulnerable to that. I think what it demonstrates is she's not a demigod, she's a human being. She's running for the highest office of the land. And that the real question is whether she is fit to run for president of the United States. I saw her 2 hours after, I saw her physically at the site of 9/11, then I saw her on video 2 hours afterwards. I saw both videos of what happened at the 9/11 site and the 2 hours later when she came out of her daughter's apartment, looking very fit and very up. She said she needed a little air, and I was there. Regardless of what the reports may be, stifling is not the word. Stifling it was incredibly hot. And I think anyone who was present at that point in place, when you're on top of each other's bodies, as we are, in those situations where people are glomming onto you, including elected officials, it's remarkable a woman like her and the schedule that she keeps is able to do what she's able to do. I just find it remarkable.
I think the vice chairman has said it well. Is anyone here willing to say that they've never gone to work when they haven't felt under the weather and probably had walking pneumonia? I know I can stand here and tell you that on any number of occasions I have gone to work. I have gotten on planes from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., red-eye flights to come to work. You think you could just go right through it. I mean, you figure you're going to make it through, and you can't cancel the meeting that you had with constituents who came all the way from California as well, and you can't disappoint them on that. It's an important vote on the floor. You can't miss that. So you try to truck through it, and sometimes you can. Sometimes you take it a little too far. I suspect as well she wasn't drinking, she wasn't hydrating, and with the difficult, humid weather, it probably made it worse. But I think we all know what it's like when you're a little under the weather and you continue to work. I get it, though. You got to ask the questions. This is a campaign for president of the United States. There's nothing wrong with asking the questions. I think it's absolutely fair to ask, is she okay? And should she have said something earlier? I will tell you this. It was less than 24 hours after she had left the 9/11 ceremonies when you all knew, we all knew, that she had pneumonia. That's pretty transparent. In fact, that's pretty darn quick transparency. And so you knew that. Even though I don't know if you needed to have all that information, because if it's, again, something that she's going to, as the vice president says, recover from, how much we all need to know is subject to question. But I will say this. I hope that what this shows is that it's time for Donald Trump to try to have some transparency as well. That crazy letter from his so-called doctor, that shows nothing. So we know less about Donald Trump's health today than we've known about Hillary Clinton's health for quite some time, because she at least provided a summary of her medical history to all of you, all of us. And she's now said she'll provide a little bit more. So you have to ask the questions, and you should. But as the vice chairman said, I hope you press her opponent now, and not just on his health, but on his taxes. How dare he say that he can get away? He is thumbing his nose at the American people, at the American voters, saying, I don't need to show you my tax returns. Hillary Clinton has shown you 40 years of her tax returns. Every candidate for president, Republican or Democrat, since Ronald Reagan has shown you their tax returns. But I don't need to. So he's thumbing their noses at the American people when it comes to tax returns. He thumbs his noses at the American people when it comes to divulging his secret plan to fight and defeat ISIS. He thumbs his nose at the American people when it comes to explaining how a guy who's so anti-immigrant and bashes immigrants is unwilling to explain how his wife, who's an immigrant, gained her legal status and was able to stay in this country and become a U.S. citizen. I hope what you guys will do is press her opponent for real answers, and not that he says, oh, I got a great plan. Oh, it's a great secret plan. Oh, I'm the healthiest around. Or, oh, she's a great U.S. citizen. I hope you guys will press him now, because he's certainly making the case that you should press her. She's been pretty straightforward about her health. She's provided a summary of her medical history. I think she's done a pretty good job. She's done everything that Barack Obama did. She has done everything that George Bush, I believe, did in providing information on her medical history. So she has definitely done what presidential candidates have done in the past, and she has said she'll do more. We still have zero real medical information on Donald Trump, unless you consider that letter, that Alice in Wonderland letter that was written by, I guess it's his doctor. I wonder if that's really his doctor, because my wife's a doctor, and that would never pass a smell test by any physician as a real letter on a person's medical history.
Can I add to that? Secretary Clinton's campaign was very quick in relation to the events of Sunday to actually then say later in the day that she was suffering, had been suffering from pneumonia. What I don't understand necessarily in your question is beyond that, in terms of not being honest, besides what Donald Trump has suggested. This is all suggestion. I think it's all been as. I don't think anyone, by the way, I haven't heard any doctor yet say that the coughing fit was beyond the issue of allergies, which, someone could have allergies and pneumonia at the same time. It's possible. So in terms of, that was days before, even Friday. So in terms of the diagnosis, I'm not a doctor. What I'm suggesting, though, is in terms of beyond what Donald Trump has been suggesting all throughout this, in a not so veiled way, which is pretty incredible and a double standard that's created for Hillary Clinton, I think, in this sense. There's nothing else there at this point. And as was said, she's going to actually give more information. Donald Trump continues to stonewall, not only on the issue of his health, but on the issue of his taxes, on the issue of who's supporting him, including neocons and white supremacists. He has never called them out on that, nor his own family background in that. We haven't heard any more delved after the New York Times article about his father. No one, it's kind of, we just mention it and then fluff it off. We need to see more, with all due respect from the media, as the chairman has said, continue to ask him to demonstrate his willingness to show a little bit more about it, be a little more revealing about Con Man Don.
Can I ask you real fast on the budgets?
Real fast.
Have talked about a strategy of moving minibuses in a lame duck. Is that something Democrats would get behind, would be interested in?
So this is the surreal world of Congress these days, where instead of talking about passing a budget, we're now down to Republican leaders talking about passing minibuses. Not a big bus where all the aspects of the federal government's budget are included. No, little tiny minibuses where you pass something for Department of Homeland Security one day, and then maybe someday later on you pass something for veterans, and another day you pass something for housing. It's crazy. It's crazy. What it is, it's the reluctance of Republicans to govern, to pass a budget the right way and fund all levels of government. They're hoping by doing these so-called minibuses that some of these so-called minibuses will ride through the finish line and they'll get funded, and then what they'll do is they'll leave the minibuses of things they don't like behind and let those things shut down. Well, the American people should be told what Republicans want to shut down, what they don't want to fund, rather than play this game of minibuses. But my God, can you imagine if you said to some small business guy or some small business woman on Main Street in any town in America, by the way, you can do a budget for your business, but you got to do it in little minibuses, little segments. What you're going to fund for your retail side of business, what you're going to fund for the wholesale side of your business. You got a little store. Okay, you can buy the produce through this fund it through this minibus. You can fund your dairy stuff through this minibus. You can fund your cereals through that's where we are. That's the height of absurdity of Congress in 2016. The reason it's become a do-nothing Congress is because exactly that. Rather than actually do their job and do a budget, they want to do minibuses. Any other questions? Thanks all very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Doug.